Welcome to Thursday. It's June 13th, 2024. This day with the podcast being brought to you by Wyoming State Parks. With temperatures warming up, Wyoming State Parks and historic sites are gearing up with a season of fun and educational summer events like the ones you see listed here. Visit these parks' respective Facebook pages for more information on these upcoming events. Well, MOTS. What does MOTS mean? Well, it means more of the same. Today's weather and tomorrow's weather and next few days will be basically the same. The only difference will be some days we'll have more thunderstorms than others. Through the weekend, temperatures are going to be quite warm. Nothing record-breaking, just warm early summer weather. We're going to see a few spotty showers and thunderstorms today. We'll show you where. We're going to see moisture increasing from the south and east, converging on the area again Friday and Saturday. This is going to be especially true east of the divide, although Friday, some of you West Slope folks might get a little bit of thunderstorm coverage. Spotty thunder, mainly east of the divide for the upcoming weekend and into the day Monday. Then an interesting pattern unfolds next week. Cooler next week. In fact, I think a good part of next week, Monday through at least Thursday, a lot of the west will cool off. The Gulf of Alaska, the northern Pacific, has an interesting pattern, and we're going to highlight this tomorrow and kind of help explain why there are pockets of some severe dryness in some areas of the western high plains and Rockies because of what's happening with La Nina and also the North Pacific. But that's going to cool us off early next week. What it's going to do is shift the heat to the Great Lakes and the east. You're going to hear next week on the news about very hot weather in New England and the east, while it will be the opposite, unseasonably cool in many areas of the far west. And that's typical. Where you get one extreme, you have the opposite somewhere else. Then, after a cool start to next week, high pressure builds back westward, and so does the heat back into the western states, but not until next weekend. Nice shot there out of eastern county Wyoming of some pretty looking clouds, of some weak showers and thunderstorms that wanted to get started yesterday. Really didn't amount to much. But today, we'll see a little bit more activity. Why? Well, on the satellite imagery this morning, doesn't look like much, but if you're a keen observer, you'll say, well, what's this right here? Well, this is a little upper level disturbance. We'd call this a vorticity maximum, where you have a spinning column of air where the air loft is just a little bit cooler. There's some moisture with it and instability. This is going to rotate around the high pressure ridge like this and instigate the showers and thunderstorms today in a little narrow ribbon. It won't be widespread, but if you're underneath this ribbon, you'll have a little bit of activity today. But the air is dry to the northwest and south of this little disturbance. And there's the high. The little disturbance is right here. Can't really see it with the resolution of this map, but there's a little wave, and it's going to just kind of go like this around the high. Here's the wave that comes in on Friday. Otherwise, it's a high-pressure dominated pattern. Now, that little wave I just showed you right there, see it spinning? See the counterclockwise rotation? Well, it's very dry here. So there's an upper level low, but it's producing very little weather because it's lacking moisture. But notice right here, see these gray clouds coming up out of northwest Mexico? This is an indication of higher level moisture coming in. It will get entrained by the low, so this low will pick up a little bit of moisture as it comes on in. Then you can see that ribbon of moisture and that instability around what I just showed you for later today. If you watch the precipitable water loop, you can see that moisture come up out of Mexico through Arizona, then kind of rotate through, especially tomorrow. This is today, that little axis right there, and then that moisture gets deeper for Friday. But it doesn't last. It moves off to the east and goes into the plains by Saturday and Sunday. So this is where the thunderstorm coverage will be today. This is where the severe weather is likely going to be today, more towards the Midwest, the Great Lakes. But a little bit of thunderstorm activity could get a little strong back on the backside. Mainly wind gusts is what we're concerned about, with thunderstorms today being severe. Coverage of thunderstorms takes off quite a bit more on Friday, a little bit on the western slope, but a concentration more here in the mountains of northern Wyoming than along and east of the Continental Divide out into the plains. Let's hope these are rain producers. They should be for some. And some of that is going to be severe. There is a severe risk tomorrow. We need to watch this. Severe could get to the front range along I-25, but Nebraska, northeast Colorado, northwest Kansas under the gun the most. And there you can see the thunderstorms on Saturday. On Saturday, the thunderstorms are more east, out on into the plains, but still could have some back along the I-25 corridor. For you folks on the western slope, very little happening. This is what we have on Sunday, kind of similar to Saturday. Enough moisture along the divide and east of the divide for a few thunderstorms, but the thunderstorm coverage will be deeper out on into the plains. As we get into early next week, here's that trough coming in. So this is a pretty significant trough for this time of year. It's going to really cool off the Pacific Northwest, then eventually the Rockies and the northern plains, while heat builds here along the East Coast. This is for Monday morning. So next week, we start off with this system coming in. The hot goes east into the Great Lakes and the east, and then that high really builds. This is where you'll hear about it on the news middle of next week, about some very hot weather in the eastern part of the United States. But while it's hot here under that high pressure, it's going to be much cooler than average here. If you compare the 30-year average with temperature and compare it to the anomaly, it looks like this by Wednesday. So quite the contrast. This will be a battle zone here in the contrast with some severe weather. While it will be quite hot relative to the 30-year average here, quite cool in the west. You always get the opposites. Somewhere where there's one spot that's super cold, you're always going to have another spot that's going to be the opposite. Goes back and forth. This is what will happen throughout the course of the weather. You'll have one spot with one extreme and another spot with the other. And this is certainly what happens. The heat will be east, cool in the west. I'll talk about this coolness in Mexico and down here in a moment. This is how it unfolds next week. By late next week, this is by next Saturday, well, we have a broad area of high pressure across a lot of the nation, but the center of it shifts westward back into Arizona. So the heat comes back to the west after a cool down. Notice this upper level low in the Gulf of Mexico. The whole upper level wind pattern for the most part is going to be clockwise here, which means this upper level low is going to want to go this way into Mexico by late next week. Now, I don't know if this is going to be a tropical storm or a tropical depression. It likely will become something of that fashion. It's the first real sign of tropical activity. We've had very heavy rains in Florida, which is not unusual. May and June gets to be rainy time this time of year down there. And this moisture is going to head westward across Mexico and could be a factor in a couple of weeks for Arizona and the Four Corners area, depending on kind of where this moisture goes and how the structure of the jet stream pattern ends up coming together in the west. Look at the heat by next Saturday. By next Saturday, it's warm in the west again and warm across most of the nation, except cool along the Gulf here because of this tropical wave that's going to be heading westbound. If you look at the same chart for next Saturday, what we'll be watching later, 2 weeks from now, is how active this northern jet stream is going to be. And we'll talk more about this tomorrow, because this northern jet stream, if it finally moves more northward, allows more of that moisture to come up northward. But if the jet stream stays south, it kind of cuts off the top of it and keeps it depressed to the south. But this could mean, in a couple of weeks, some better chances of rain for Arizona, better chances of rain in the Great Basin, and better chances of rain for you folks on the western slope. Look at the rains forecasted by late next week and next weekend into Mexico, the Yucatan here, the Gulf Coast states, all depending on where this goes. But this will be a tremendous amount of very moist, unstable air coming westward into Mexico, then eventually could get caught up and head northward. But we just don't know yet. It could get shunted to the west and stay that way and not have a chance to come north. But if it does have a chance to come north, that could be an interesting scenario. We're just going to have to wait and see. Have yourself a good Thursday. We'll see you tomorrow.